So, over the past year, I've been working on props for a short independent sci-fi film, making all the props and masks for the characters in the film. And I thought I'd make a little video to show my process. So here I'm just starting up my 3D printers after designing the robot scanners on the computer. Lots of back and forth with the director until we're happy with the design. Then here I am getting the parts off the printer. Then getting rid of the prototype and ready to test all the electronic components that will go into the final prop. Just checking to make sure that they fit properly, because it's easier to make any adjustments I need to do now rather than later once I've done the paint job at the end. Now then, time to move into the garage, where I can actually begin assembling this thing. Ignore my hair, this was just after COVID and I hadn't had a haircut yet. So the first step is to sand down the joining sections so that the glue has something to bite onto, give it a bit of tooth, and also helps them sit more flush together. Then I clamp them to hold them in the position that I need them. Then I'm going to go in with a soldering iron to just melt the plastic together to make a nice strong bond. I'm just going through the soldering iron to tack it all together a bit. Then I can remove the clips and go through and properly weld the pieces together. I'm going to use an old soldering iron for that because it will get very grubby. So here I've gone all the way around it, and then I can come back through with some super glue just to really make sure it's a nice strong bond. Thumbs up. And now we begin sanding, and this is the longest process of the entire prop. There's lots of sanding, and lots of filling, and lots of sanding. So I'm just giving the main plastic section a whole once over with the sandpaper, very coarse sandpaper, going with that first, just to take out the bulk of the layer lines that you get from 3D printing. Now, once you've given it a nice thorough sanding to start with, I'm going to go in with some Bondo Spot Putty, which is a car body filler, which will really fill in the gaps and actually stink, so it's important to put a mask and gloves. So now we just want to massage it all over the entire prop, just to fill in all those little layer lines left over from the 3D printing. And it's going to really help smooth it out. So once that's done, it's going to look like this, just covered and caked in mud essentially. And then we're going to go through with some filler primer, which this is essentially like just a really thick spray paint, which we can go really heavy with, just to fill in any gaps that were missed with the Bondo, and also any areas that I left bare, because they'll be hard to go in with some sandpaper later, just if they're in hard to reach places. This will do most of the job anyway, in those gaps. Now the most messiest part, we'll have to go out into the garage, outside of the garage, and we're going to use the electronic mouse sander just to give it a really, really good sanding now. So I'm using quite a coarse pad on the sander here. It kicks up a lot of dust, so that's why I'm in that. So now we've used the mouse sander to knock back the Bondo. You see it's now left it in all the layer lines, whereas it's nice and smooth on over the top. Now we can go through with some hand sandpaper, a bit of a finer grit to really help it be a bit smoother. Now we're going to go through and touch up any areas that need a little bit more work, and we're going to give it another coat of the filler primer, and then sand that all back. Now we can just also quickly put in the bolts that will be used to hold on the battery cover. So now this is, once I've done a lot of sanding and filling and sanding and filling, I'm left with that, a nice smooth prop. And I can move out into my sort of painting station. So I'm going to use my airbrush to give it a quick primer of black, and then gunmetal grey over the entire thing with some chrome on some of the details. And then I've got some copper paint here through my airbrush just to really make those accents pop. Unfortunately, I didn't record a lot of the airbrushing, but you get the gist. Now we've done with the painting, we can remove the masking tape. Ooh, nice crisp peel. Now I'm going to use some of this metallizing powder. It's a sort of graphite powder which will really help it shine and make it look more like metal. And it's very important that you spill a bunch of it all over your table, and then brush it everywhere to really spread it around for a nice graphite spludge on your table. Now I'm going to use this sort of, it's like a makeup sponge, just to dab it on and massage the powder, really work it into the paint job. Get a nice shiny finish. Now I'm going to go back out to the painting station and just by hand with a paintbrush paint in some more details, such as these copper rivets. Now I'm going to try and do a little bit of dry brushing over the whole thing. And this is a technique where you take a nice big brush, like a makeup brush, and you load it up with paint and then blast it all over a bit of kitchen roll, wasting it all. And then you can just brush it over the entire thing, and it leaves behind just a nice subtle variation in the metal. It gives a nice chipping effect and wear. And my favourite part, I've got some weathering here. I'm going to be using a nice dark wash made of some black ink, some paint, some water, and some flow improver, a bit thinner. And we're just going to brush this over the entire thing. Now, it looks bad now, and it looks very, very dark, but you then just dab it off and wipe away, and it will leave it all in the recesses and sort of darkening the whole thing and bringing it all nice and grim and weathered and used. So again, we're just smothering the whole thing and then wiping and dabbing, depending on how much we want. Now I've fitted the electronics and wired it all up. Got some nice flashing effect with that little button on the back. And I also 3D printed out of transparent filament the screen for nice diffusion. Now we're going to do some leather wrap on the handle. So here I'm just cutting a hole for the button to fit there, lovely. And then I'm going to tack it in with some hot glue, just trim it around the button a bit more. I'm tacking it with hot glue, and then I'm going to begin to wrap and continue to tack it with hot glue. I'm just going to do that around the whole thing, and then once that's done, I'll coat it with Mod Podge, which will seal it and give it a nice matte finish. And I also gave it a wash with that same black wash that I used earlier, just to make sure it doesn't look perfectly clean, the handle, compared to the rest of the prop. Then it was on to making 3 more. So same process, we've got 3D printing, a lot of 3D printing. And then there's the first prop done. All the lights working lovely. Time for more. So first step, just cleaning up the prints, getting rid of any of the supports that were on them. Then I'll sand them down and fill them, sand them and sand them, and fill them and sand them and sand them. And then once that's done, I can paint them and catch them up with the first prop, and then we're done. So here are the 4 robot scanners for the sci-fi film that I'm working on. Hope you enjoyed.